Just setting it. Okay, hello everybody. This is Yom Kippur, a very important day. Secular Synagogue just concluded our Yom Kippur service, but we wanted to continue with the themes of remembrance and honoring those who hold values that are guides for us, and do a special service remembering the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is a story of transformation originally written for Orenu Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, where typically on the day of Yom Kippur, instead of a traditional service, they tell stories of people who are cultural Jews, secular Jews, who have done extraordinary things to change the world, even though they were just born regular people, reminding us we can all be heroes. So this one was written for Yom Kippur 2018, or 5779. And of course, with the recent death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we want to honor her, and so we will do it in this way today. So I am joined here by beloved Secular Synagogue folks, Robin and Jake and Julia, and I'm Denise, and we're going to embody some of the people in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life. I will just tell you that everything in the story is based on writings about her, so it is all true, even though in some cases I've shifted the language in order for it to flow and to make sense. So here we go. This story is about a woman who has been called an evildoer, anti-American, a zombie, someone with no respect for the Constitution. And of course, I'm talking about American Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Known as the notorious RBG, Ginsburg's life has been one of change and transformation from her very youth. As we'll hear, both her personal and professional life, she sought out equality and justice for women, for people of color, and for all those who are oppressed. One of her favorite quotes was from Sarah Grimke, an abolitionist and equal rights advocate, who said in 1837, "I ask no favor of my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet from off our necks." And now I'm becoming her mother, Celia Bader. My daughter Ruth was born to my husband Nathan and I in 1933. We were Russian Jewish immigrants. Nathan would sometimes say to me, "Celia, you push this girl too much," for it was not normal for mothers to push their daughters to become educated, but I wanted that for Ruth. Perhaps I placed unfair pressure on her, as she was my only living child. Her sister tragically died before her second birthday of meningitis. Women of my generation did not usually pursue dreams and goals of their own. I had wanted to be educated and to have a career, but my brother needed money for his education, and so I left school at a young age to work to support him. I knew this wasn't fair. I impressed that on Ruth. Although neither Nathan nor I attended college, we wanted Ruth to be educated and successful, maybe even become a history teacher.
My mother was not educated due to sexism, and my father was not educated due to anti-Semitism. In Odessa, where my father was from, Jews were not admitted to Russian schools. My mother was loving, but strict. We were very close. She wanted me to work hard, particularly when it came to homework and practicing piano.
I admired Ruth's spirit. She was quiet as a child, but with that came a quiet strength. She loved to do the things the boys did, such as climbing garage roofs and leaping to the next roof over. She had close girlfriends, but didn't do small talk or girl talk. She was always a deep thinker. She assumed leadership roles very early. We sent her to a Jewish summer camp, and she became the camp rabbi very quickly, a role she relished. Ruth loved our trips to the library together. We enjoyed reading and talking. We had a lovely mother-daughter bond. It is hard to believe that my little girl went on to do all the things she did.
My mother was sick with cancer for a long time and fought harder than anyone could have expected. It was clear she wanted to see me through high school and set me up for success. Sadly, she died just before my high school graduation. I have always hoped above all in my life that I am and have done all that she would have been and done had she lived in an age when women could aspire and achieve. My mother repeated two lessons all the time: be a lady and be independent. To be a lady meant don't allow yourself to be overcome by useless emotions like anger. She taught me to retain an even keel. To be independent meant it's fine if you meet Prince Charming, but always be able to fend for yourself. My parents instilled in me a Jewish identity. In my formative years, I was aware of the Holocaust and aware that there were signs around where I lived that said no Jews or dogs allowed. I was raised to seek justice for myself, my people, and everyone around me. Although I'm proudly Jewish, I stopped attending synagogue and lost connection with much Jewish practice after my mother died, and the synagogue would not count me in the minyan to say Kaddish because I was a woman. Imagine being told my saying Kaddish for my own mother was not equivalent to a man, any man, saying it. I'm delighted to see female rabbis and liberal congregations now. Perhaps things might have been different for me if they had existed then.
Ruth called me truly extraordinary for a man of my generation because I believed when we met that a woman's work, whether at home or out at a job, is as important as a man's. Ruth became a lawyer when women were not wanted by most members of the legal profession. She says she did it because I supported her choice unreservedly. I did, but she would have surely done whatever she wanted anyway.
Marty and I met when I was 17 and he 18. We were at Cornell. It was preferred that daughters went to Cornell because there were 4 men to every woman. So girls got sent there because if she couldn't find her man there, she was hopeless.
Her first semester at Cornell, she never went on a second date with the same man. She said none of the guys cared that she had a brain. I loved her brain. I loved that she wasn't like the other girls who suppressed their intelligence. I never saw Ruth's intelligence as a threat. We were very different from each other. I was gregarious, a jokester, the life of the party. Ruth was shy and quiet, but we worked together, sharing a deep sense of appreciation and, of course, love for the other. A professor showed Ruth during the Red Scare that it was lawyers who were ensuring the right to speak, write, and think freely. This inspired Ruth to pursue the law as her career, and she went to Harvard. Some had reservations about Ruth becoming a lawyer. Truthfully, they relaxed a bit when Ruth and I married. If her life as a lawyer didn't work out, they thought, at least she had a husband. Boy, she sure showed them.
It was not easy to be one of only 9 women in a class of over 500. We were not called on to answer questions. We were judged harshly, knowing that if we failed in any way, it would reflect on all women, not just ourselves. Our dean threw a dinner for us women and asked us why we had taken the seat of a man in the school. It was uncomfortable. We had to work much harder to be taken seriously at all. Marty believed in me. He knew that I would be on the Harvard Law Review, for which one had to be in the top 25% of their class. I made it in my second year. Some say I did this in spite of having a 14-month-old child, my daughter Jane, when beginning law school. But I was able to balance everything because Marty shared in the household responsibilities. I worked industriously during the day, spent the afternoon and evening with our daughter, and then worked again at night. Jane gave me a break from serious study and recharged me to continue working through the night. It was during this period that I got into the habit of working all night long, something I have done throughout my career.
Sadly, though, I got sick, and Ruth had to take care of not only our daughter, but me too. I had cancer before there was chemotherapy. I was in the 3rd year of law school myself and could barely function. Ruth helped me with my work, recruited friends to help me also, did her own work, and took care of our 2-year-old. She was indefatigable. She said this period showed her how much a person could accomplish. Our second child, James, came along, and Ruth continued right on, working through the night, attending court, parenting, and supporting me. James and Jane recall her sleeping all weekend to catch up. Throughout her career, I would sometimes have to visit her in her chambers and urge her to come home to eat and sleep. Ruth switched to Columbia Law School during my illness. She graduated in 1959. Not a single law firm would hire her. Some of my friends approached a partner at their own firm and suggested they hire this person who had been on the Harvard Law Review. They were very interested until they found out she was a woman.
I didn't set out to be a crusader for women's rights. I set out to be a lawyer. But to get hired as a lawyer, it became clear that there needed to be advocacy for the rights of women in the workforce. Being a woman was an impediment. That seemed unjust to me. And so my first battle for justice as a lawyer was to get myself taken seriously. There were so many laws that enshrined discrimination of women. I saw a way for me to create real change by changing some of those laws. For example, that a woman could be fired for getting pregnant. A husband had to co-sign a loan for his wife. Benefits were not equal. There was so much to do. In 1963, unable to get a job as a lawyer, I started at Rutgers University as a law professor. I was inspired by my students to begin teaching a course on women and the law. During that time, I began dealing with sex discrimination cases. I became a litigator with the ACLU, which wanted to begin a women's rights project. They asked me and a colleague to co-lead it.
Ruth would only take cases that she thought would make good law. She was inspired by Thurgood Marshall's work for racial equality. He fought for equal protection under the law for Black people. She wanted to do the same for women. In 1973, she argued for Sharon Frontiero, who was serving in the US Air Force and who was trying to get the same housing allowance as men of her rank. The law had to be changed for Frontiero to be entitled to this allowance. Ruth and the ACLU knew this case could lead the way to make law that said employers had to treat women equally under the law. She fought with fervor. She did this by arguing not just for Frontiero, but by showing the male members of the court various examples of how women were treated as inferior. They were enraptured by her presence, her power. They had no idea, as a panel of male judges, what the world was like for women. She argued that sex classifications in workplace legislation are designed to keep women in an inferior position to men. She was showing them the injustice of this and asking them to rectify it. She won the case, but the judge ruled 4-5 against her request that sex discrimination be treated the same as racial discrimination in legal statutes. But she knew that change happened one step at a time. She was calculating and patient. This case opened the conversation. She would have to argue again and again to achieve the civil rights for which she was fighting.
We fought case after case about gender discrimination. We took the case of a father who was appealing for what were called mother's rights after the death of his wife. The male judges were persuaded by that case, and we were able to show once again that gender discrimination was wrong. We did this case after case, fighting gender-based discrimination cases through the 70s, always arguing that the gender line helps keep women in a cage, not on a pedestal.
Some said I was the best tax lawyer in the city of New York, which is really saying something. But there came a time when we had to choose between prioritizing Ruth's career or my own. In the 1970s, President Jimmy Carter set out to diversify the bench. This was Ruth's chance. When Ruth was appointed to a higher court in Washington, D.C., I had to leave my role in order to support Ruth. I was delighted to do it. People assumed I would tell Ruth what to do in deciding her legal cases. People still thought that as a man, I had the greater legal mind. I would tell people that, as a general rule, Ruth does not give me any advice about cooking, and I don't give her any advice about the law. This seemed to work well. I did more work at home with our children and then grandchildren. Ruth fought for justice every day on the bench, working tirelessly. Our lives were happy. Our relationship remained strong throughout the years. In 1993, President Bill Clinton was nominating a new Supreme Court justice. Ruth's name had been bandied about, but people said she was too old. This was clearly an unfair judgment on her as a woman, for there were older men on the bench. I had contacts in legal, academic, and business communities, and I pushed and pushed for people to put pressure on Clinton to nominate Ruth. Clinton himself acknowledges that this is the only reason he considered her for the nomination. I got her the audience, but Ruth dazzled and then convinced him. She was brilliant. During her 1993 confirmation hearings, Ruth took a risk. She spoke about her deep passion for abortion rights. In spite of this being a highly divisive issue, Ruth saw it as central to her work and role as a judge who would fight for women's rights. She won the respect of even Republican committee members. She was confirmed.
As a Supreme Court justice, I've seen my role as trying to build consensus among the judges. When I started, I was certainly not the most left-leaning of the judges. However, I am opposed to some conservative ideals. My goal has always been to try to bring judges on both sides closer to the center, always with a view to increasing rights and liberty along the way. I do not fight or argue with the other judges, although I do sometimes try to persuade them. I became known for writing the landmark decision whereby the Virginia Military Institute was compelled to include women. We got a lot of pushback at the time, but I remember telling people, you'll be proud of these women who graduate. After all, they have to meet the same standards as their male counterparts. I've learned from experience that proving yourself as a woman often means one has to be an even stronger and tougher competitor. Of course, the female graduates of VMI have done exceedingly well. I knew they would. If there's one thing that surprises people about me, it is my close relationship with Justice Antonin Scalia. Scalia and I disagreed on pretty much every case we heard. We had very different ideas about how to promote justice in America. But off the bench, we were very good friends, traveling together, celebrating holidays with each other's families, and making sure we took care to check in with one another. Scalia joked that we could be known as the odd couple. He once said, Justice Ginsburg is a wonderful person. She loves opera. I mean, what's not to like? Except her legal opinions, of course. Oh, he was funny. Scalia believed the Constitution should be read and practiced according to the wishes of the founding fathers. I found that convenient. The Constitution was striving for a more perfect union. Where it says we the people, it did not mean me. It did not mean African Americans. It should now. Scalia got this part wrong, but his heart was in the right place. I was never supposed to be the great dissenter, but this became my fate. First, when I fervently dissented in the 5-4 decision to confirm George W. Bush as president in the year 2000 and not to have a recount. Then Bush appointed 2 justices to the Supreme Court bench. I still believed in consensus, but it was now up to others to try to convince me more than the other way around. I was always a minority on the bench. Since then, I've most often been a minority opinion. I've become famous for my dissenting jabot, the jeweled collar I wear when I give a dissenting opinion. I also wore it after Trump became president. I wear different jabots for different occasions and judgments. I want a visual way of signaling my dissent and sometimes outrage. I continue to fight for the rights of women as I fight for the equal rights of all. Now, I more often do this by trying to change the way people discuss these issues, even when I cannot change the outcome of the judgments themselves. The first bill Barack Obama signed, the Fair Pay Restoration Act, was based on one of my dissenting opinions. We lost the case at the Supreme Court, but won in the court of public opinion that fair pay should be enshrined in law. I am proud to be able to make this difference still.
To say Ruth has had a formidable career is a huge understatement. She is a force. Unfortunately, our time together had to come to an end, though. I got sick again, and sadly, this time there was no saving me. Ruth had a terrible time of it, but she always steeled herself in public. I wrote her a final letter in my final days, saying I loved her above anyone in my life, and that I was checking into a medical center to decide whether it was worth continuing treatment. I knew she may not agree with my decision, but I promised I would not love her one jot less. I also told her what a treat it has been to watch her progress to the very top of the legal world.
Marty was truly happy to care for our kids and then their kids. He died in 2010, and I was devastated. Still, there was work to do. My daughter Jane has said that her first memories are of Marty cooking. They were also her last memories of Marty, for he cooked for me even when he was too sick to eat himself. He was the most caring man. He was truly my best friend.
I'm Ruth's granddaughter, Clara. I know you know her as Ruth, but I call her Bubby. I am a student at Harvard Law School, where my Bubby began her legal education. Of course, she has been such an inspiration to me. She has taught me many things, including that the way to win an argument is not to yell. Bubby taught me not to turn people off or away, but to call them in. My Bubby has always loved opera. It has served as a place for her to escape the demands of her job, to stop thinking about her cases and briefs, and to be overwhelmed by the beauty of the music, the sound of the human voice. She finds justice and mercy in all opera. My peers, law students, young women, activists, and those fighting on today's fronts of justice have all looked to her for inspiration. It's easy to forget and to take for granted the freedoms people of my generation enjoy largely due to her. My Bubby was a devoted mother, but a little bit strict, just like her mother had been. She has high expectations of her grandchildren, just like she had high expectations for herself. Tata, Marty, was often the good cop to her bad cop for their kids and then in turn their grandkids. We have all been raised to know Bubby as a force for justice and a public figure, but Tata reminded us that we should be proud of her and proud to be in her family. He did the lion's share of the caregiving, and he wanted us to understand that her work was important. He wanted us to love her, and of course, we do. Part of how Bubby dealt with my Tata's death was committing herself even more to her work. She consistently filed all the time she would have spent with him on work, and it was her way of honoring him. In 2013, my Bubby rose to even greater prominence, especially with those of my generation, with her fiery defense against the 5-4 ruling on the Voting Rights Act decision. My Bubby felt the decision would make it easier to create racial discrimination in voting. Her side lost the battle to preserve this legislation, but her dissent became famous with young people, people of color, people who had never paid much attention to law. Many people have said it was this decision and Bubby's dissent that made them realize the power of law. It is also how she earned the moniker the Notorious RBG after the rapper the Notorious B.I.G. and the meme that went viral, "You can't spell truth without Ruth." She became an icon almost overnight. For me, as her grandchild, this is all a little weird, honestly, but I secretly think she liked it. She has given Notorious RBG shirts to friends. Imagine this tiny little person wielding such incredible power and force. But as her family, we worried for her. She survived 2 types of cancer, all while not missing one day on the bench. She said cancer gave her enhanced appreciation of being alive. It also led her to take her health seriously. She made headlines working with a trainer and even published her workout schedule. People actually do the RBG workout every day. Some of this stuff you just couldn't make up.
I hope I've always been an example to my grandchildren in all things, and above all, in fighting for justice. While judges should avoid commenting on public office, in 2016, I spoke out publicly against the Trump presidency. I apologized, as this is unwise for a sitting justice to do. I was incensed when people said maybe now I'd let my decisions be affected by my feelings for Trump. All of us know to put our political leanings aside and hear the case and judge according to the law. The notion that I don't understand my job, my role, is insulting. In 2016, I made a statement that now more than ever, I feel I am needed. I will do this job for as long as I can do it full steam. On July 4th, 2018, I was honored to receive the Genesis Prize for Lifetime Achievement given in Israel. I was proud to receive this prize as both a woman and as a Jew. In my speech, I paid tribute to both Emma Lazarus, the Zionist, and Henrietta Zold, Hadassah founder. These women inspired me in my early years, similarly to how people like Clara claim I inspire women in contemporary society. When I became active in the movement to open doors to women, enabling them to enter occupations once closed to them, lawyering and judging, bartending, policing, firefighting, for a few examples. I was heartened by the words of a girl of my generation. She wrote, "One of the many questions that has often bothered me is why women have been and still are thought to be so inferior to men. It's easy to say it's unfair, but that's not enough for me. I'd really like to know the reason for this great injustice. Men presumably dominated women from the very beginning because of their greater physical strength. It's men who earn a living, beget children, and do as they please. Until recently, women silently went along with this, which was stupid, since the longer it's kept up, the more deeply entrenched it becomes. Fortunately, education, work, and progress have opened women's eyes. In many countries, they've been granted equal rights. Many people, mainly women, but also men, now realize how wrong it was to tolerate this state of affairs for so long. Yours, Anne M. Frank." This insightful comment was one of the last entered in her diary. I was asked some years ago by the American Jewish Committee to supply a statement on how my heritage as a Jew and my occupation as a judge fit together. I responded this way: "I'm a judge, born, raised, and proud of being a Jew. The demand for justice, for peace, for enlightenment runs through the entirety of the Jewish history and the Jewish tradition. I hope that in all the years I've had the good fortune to continue serving on the bench of the Supreme Court of the United States, I will have the strength and courage to remain steadfast in service of that demand." While I've had a complicated relationship with Judaism, in my office hangs a poster of the phrase from the Torah, "Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof," justice, justice shall you pursue. These are words to live by.
And as it turns out, they were words to die by as well. Justice Ginsburg died on Rosh Hashanah Eve this year. Clara, her granddaughter, made a public statement that she'd said she desperately wanted her Supreme Court replacement to be chosen after the election. On her deathbed, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was concerned for the future of her country and for the Supreme Court to be an instrument of true justice. At Rosh Hashanah, we speak about when we've missed the mark, and at Yom Kippur, we atone. I think it's important to say that there were times that Ruth Bader Ginsburg missed the mark. She wasn't correct on some issues of race. She supported a pipeline through Standing Rock. She made mistakes. Those who celebrate her without acknowledging her imperfections turn her from a human being into a symbol. But it was her very humanity that is so inspiring. She overcame so much and accomplished so much. Those who are ready to only point out her flaws are also in the wrong. Her legacy and inspiration still matter. The way she inspires people can inspire us to do good in the world. We must, especially at this time of year, celebrate people in spite of their imperfections. After all, the point of these holidays is to acknowledge that each of us and all of us are imperfect, and yet, in our way, holy, and always capable of being better in the year to come. Many have shared teachings about how one who dies on Rosh Hashanah is considered a tzaddik, a righteous person. Tzaddik, related to tzedek for justice, is a great descriptor of Ginsburg, who kept the lines tzedek, tzedek, tirdof in her office and in her heart throughout her career. On this Yom Kippur 2020, 5781 in the Jewish calendar, we are a society in turmoil. COVID, anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism and violence, a rise in white supremacy, climate change resulting in biblical floods and fires, so much poverty and suffering. To lose a figurehead like Ginsburg has been one of a series of painful losses, and we are still reeling. I do like what some people are sharing, that as much as our hope rested with Ginsburg, hers rested with us. We all have the capacity to be instruments of justice. I really do appreciate that she maintained a relationship with Justice Scalia. I will admit, I don't always have the stomach to love people across difference and division, although I am committed to learning from her example. You can be a fierce dissenter and still lead with love. You can work harder than hard and still be a devoted partner, parent, and grandparent. You can prize justice above all else, but not lose yourself, your humanity, in the fight for it. You can still make room for music, joyous dinners, big love. This Yom Kippur, I hope for all of us that we use this time to connect with the way in which there is a tzaddik, a righteous person, within each of us. We can say that we will no longer succumb to selfishness, to bullshit, to convenience, and we will show up to do the work that makes the world better. We face seemingly insurmountable barriers, but so did she. We are just ordinary citizens, and so was she. And like she, the camp rabbi, feminist trailblazer, terrible cook, gym rat, Supreme Court justice, we can live full and beautiful lives while accomplishing amazing things. Wishing you all a good and sweet year. Thank you so much to our readers who embodied these characters so beautifully. I look forward to raising hell with all members of Secular Synagogue and all of you touched by our work. Shana Tova.